Welcome to Future Trends, where we examine the latest stories reshaping tomorrow's international dynamics. This week's headlines: Russia free of nuclear arms limits as treaty ends, India-Bangladesh relations decline, Sudan forces break siege on key city, Bolivia ends 20 years of socialism with capitalism for all reforms, Japan markets set for renewed rally after Takaichi's landslide win, and AI no better than internet search for medical advice. Starting with elections, Japan markets set for renewed rally after Takaichi's landslide election win. Since she began her rise to premier in October, the Takaichi trade has pushed domestic shares to record highs while causing a sell-off in Japanese government bonds and the yen. After coming to office at a low point in power and popularity for her Liberal Democratic Party, Takaichi, a devotee of the stimulus policies of the late Premier Shinzo Abe, has pledged a proactive fiscal policy funded largely through bond issuance. Fernandez overwhelmingly wins Costa Rica presidency as populist project secures new term. The candidate handpicked by the departing president won Costa Rica's presidential election with 48% of the votes, avoiding a runoff. Her victory came amid a crisis marked by unprecedented violence levels in Costa Rica. Thailand's conservative Phumjaithai party will need partners to form government. Prime Minister Chanvirakul's party took a commanding lead, winning about 194 seats in the 500-member House of Representatives. With a majority of 251 seats needed, Phumjaithai would need a coalition partner. The Progressive People's Party was second with 116 seats, while Pheu Thai, the populist party of former Prime Minister Shinawatra, trailed behind with 76 seats. Centre-left Seguro defeats far-right rival in Portugal. Socialist Seguro scored a landslide victory over far-right populist Ventura in Portugal's presidential runoff, in a setback to the country's rising populist right, and handing the largely ceremonial presidency to a moderate figure promising stability after years of political turmoil. Moving to stories in politics, Bolivia ends 20 years of socialism with capitalism for all reforms. Bolivia's new President Paz is planning major reforms to unleash a mining and oil exploration boom, burying nearly 20 years of socialism in the Andean nation and signaling a significant political and economic realignment. Iran's Nobel winner faces new prison term. Activist Narges Mohammadi, 53, who has been imprisoned repeatedly in her 3-decade campaign for women's rights, was sentenced to a new prison term of 7.5 years after denouncing the suspicious death of lawyer Khosrow Alakordi. Tehran renewed a crackdown on dissent during nearly 3 weeks of anti-government protests. Indonesia and Australia sign new security treaty. Australia's Prime Minister Albanese and Indonesian President Subianto signed a joint security treaty in Jakarta, pledging regular consultations and cooperation on common security challenges, highlighting deeper defense and diplomatic ties in the Indo-Pacific region. Analysts said the treaty is becoming increasingly important to Australia while tensions with China in the region are growing. South Africa to withdraw troops from DRC. South Africa has supported the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the DRC for 27 years and has more than 700 soldiers deployed there. It said the decision to leave the 11,000-troop MONUSCO force, whose mandate is to counter the many rebel groups who have been fighting for decades in eastern Congo, was influenced by the need to consolidate and realign the resources of the National Defense Force. Here's the latest news in conflict. Russia says it is no longer bound by nuclear arms limits as treaty with US ends. Moscow vowed to act responsibly as its last nuclear treaty with the US expires, sparking fears of a new arms race. The bilateral New START treaty is set to end after the US administration failed to follow up with negotiations. Sudan forces break siege on key city. The Sudanese armed forces claim to have broken the years-long siege of the city of Kadugli in what would constitute a clear shift of momentum in Sudan's years-long civil war. Kadugli has been experiencing famine conditions since 2025 and has been subject to relentless drone attacks by the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. The liberation of the city comes as the RSF has showed signs of strain across its front lines, now that Emirati arms shipments cannot be trafficked rapidly from Libya. EU countries sealed deal on a $105 billion loan for Ukraine. Funded through joint debt, Ukraine will receive $35 billion to support its budgetary needs and $70 billion to purchase weapons and ammunition. As part of the deal, Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic will be completely exempted from all financial obligations, including annual interest payments. The three countries had firmly opposed any additional assistance to Kyiv. Clashes intensify in remote East Congo, challenging US mediation. The conflict between government forces and rebel groups, AFC, M23, and allies, comes despite a ceasefire monitoring agreement. The violence is straining local hospitals and complicating Western-led peace efforts. Now for the latest in economics. Bitcoin gains eroded as crypto volatility signals uncertainty. Bitcoin lost its price gains since the election of US President Trump a year ago, halving since its all-time high of $125,000 in October 2025. Bitcoin's slump alongside other digital asset prices coincides with investor concerns about inflated tech valuations and the uncertain path of US Federal Reserve rate cuts. Trade deals between Argentina and US, Uruguay and China. The move by the US and Argentina to cut tariffs on each other's goods in an expansive trade deal boosts a drive by President Milei to open Argentina's protectionist economy and a push by the US administration to reduce food prices for Americans. Uruguay and China signed agreements in areas such as investment, trade, and scientific cooperation, and called for free trade negotiations between China and South American Customs Union Mercosur. Indian refiners avoid Russian oil in push for US trade deal. The move, including Indian refiners avoiding Russian oil purchases for delivery in April, could help India's government seal a trade pact with Washington. The US and India moved closer to a trade pact, announcing a framework for a deal they hope to conclude by March that would lower tariffs and deepen economic cooperation. Taiwan's economy grows 8.6% in 2025, fastest rate in 15 years. Its export-focused industries were boosted by the rise of artificial intelligence and shipments to the US. The advanced estimate released by Taiwan's statistics agency was much better than forecast, and economists say the economy could be further stimulated by Taiwan's recent trade deal with the US, which lowered tariffs to 15% from 20% in exchange for pledges of at least $250 billion of investment in the US in areas such as semiconductors and AI. Europe's central bank holds rates with economic growth resilient. The economy in the 21 countries that use the euro recorded modest yet resilient growth despite the disruption from US tariffs. The bank left its benchmark deposit rate at 2%, where it has been since June, after a series of cuts from the peak of 4% starting in mid-2024. Brother of Israel's security chief arrested in alleged Gaza smuggling ring, Bezalel Zini, a brother of Shin Bet chief David Zini, was arrested as part of an operation to smuggle illegal cigarettes into Gaza for profit, which included some Israeli reserve soldiers as well as Palestinians. Zini allegedly smuggled 14 crates of cigarettes into Gaza, for which he received about $117,000. Google to double spending amid AI race. Alphabet reported quarterly revenue of $113.8 billion, with annual revenue exceeding $400 billion for the first time. As major tech companies face investor scrutiny over both earnings and spending in AI, Google will nearly spend double to $185 billion this year to expand AI infrastructure for Gemini. Rise in abandoned oil tankers. In 2025, 410 ships were abandoned globally, according to the International Transport Workers Federation, ITF, up by almost a third on 2024. Geopolitical instability is said to have been a driving factor of the increase in recent years, triggering supply chain disruption and rises in freight costs. leaving some operators are struggling to stay afloat, while the growing prevalence of so-called shadow fleets, typically aging oil tankers, could be contributing to the rise. Finally, our social news: former Hong Kong media owner and Beijing critic sentenced to 20 years. Pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai's case was one of the most prominent under a China-imposed national security law that has virtually silenced dissent. 3 government-vetted judges sentenced Lai, 78, on charges of conspiring with others to collude with foreign forces to endanger national security and conspiracy to publish seditious articles. AI no better than internet search for patients seeking medical advice. Humans using large language models, LLMs, identified their health conditions in 94.9% of cases, but only chose the correct course of action, like calling an ambulance or going to the doctor, in an average of 56.3% of cases. The study led by Oxford University found humans often were providing incomplete or wrong information, but the LLMs were also sometimes generating misleading or incorrect responses. New spray stops severe bleeding in under a second. The spray, developed by Korea scientists, could prove revolutionary for emergency medical treatment where patients are at risk of bleeding out, like on the battlefield. It reacts with blood to turn it into a soft, rubbery gel in less than a second, sealing the wound and accelerating the natural clotting process. Slovenia joined Spain and Greece latest to propose teen social media ban. The 3 European nations are the latest to follow Australia's lead in banning social media for children under 16 in December, while Britain, France, Denmark, and Austria are also considering tougher stances. Pumas are back in Patagonia and hunting penguins. Mainland penguins evolved without land predators. After cattle ranching ended in southern Argentina in 1990, pumas gradually began reclaiming parts of their historic range. Scientists estimate that more than 7,000 adult penguins were killed in just 4 years by pumas. That's your Future Trends update for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories reshaping our world.